Star Citizen 4.1 was announced sometime. I don't even know when. But we knew it was coming at some point. It's the Q1 update. They're still doing their 4 updates a year model, I guess. 4 big updates. This is something they've been doing all the way back since 2017. They started with 3.0 in 2017 and then 3.1 in March of 2018. Now, y'all see what time it is here. It is March, so this makes sense. It's online. But they slowly slipped on their schedule. So first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter. The next one was April, though. And so the update started to slip further and further back over the years. You can go to the next year and you can see it's in April 29th. Then you go to the next year, it's the 22nd. And the following year, it's the 29th again. And then the following year, it's in freaking May. So they were never great at their timing on these quarterly updates, but they did try to push 4 a year every year. Now, the difference between this year and other years is that this was the whole priority. These were feature-focused patches that were meant to just build the game out and try and get as many features in as possible so that people could use them, play them, run them through their paces, and they could make sure it just functioned in the engine. This was their autopilot phase, we'll call it, because they were just kind of adding stuff in and not really focused on any one direction, other than making things play. Now, they kind of started to change this towards 3.18 because they went from time-focused updates to content-focused updates with things like persistent entity streaming in 3.18, with the replication layer stuff going on and somewhere around here with Vulkan and image upscaling, and then finally with server meshing. This pushed them to have to do certain updates at certain times. That's why we had the last 2 years. It was really all over the place. But since 4.0, something new has started happening. They're putting in content and bug fixing focused patches every month. And instead of getting a 4.0.1 or a 4.0.2 at random intervals, they are now happening at the end of each month. And that on its own is also nothing new. Even all the way back here, you could see we had 3.3.5. There was a 3.9.1, 3.10.2, 3.15.2, 3.18.2. There were a whole bunch of, this is not a new thing, but now they're tying them to time-based schedule, and they're releasing them monthly. And they've been doing a good job so far, but we'll see if they can stick to it. Either way, that has led people to be a little confused about what's going to happen with 4.1. But now that they've revealed it, we can see that there is some interesting stuff planned, and it's a bigger deal than it might seem. So let's start with the mission giver first. I actually put a video out about this already, so it's not as interesting. We won't spend as much time, but Wicklow is the first mission giver we've seen since all the way back in like 3.5 with Tisha. And the thing about Tisha is she doesn't really function. Sorry, girl. Like most mission givers, you don't know what you're doing in game. And that's always been a big problem for us. But the monthly reports have shown that they are starting to work on mission givers again. The narrative team is talking about how they're getting people into the game that represent factions. So Hurston Dynamics, ArcCorp, Microtech, all these different factions we've known for a long time are going to finally start having faces and people and voices associated with them. And that's good for us because that makes the game a lot less boring. But it also means more missions like Tisha's, which if you run through hers, you know it's probably one of the more interesting missions in the game. Now, Wickelow's not a paradigm shift. He just calls you and tells you to get some stuff. That's not really why it's a big deal. The big deal is more just what it means and the fact that they're focusing on it again. This is really, really big for people who are looking for solo play, because we've all been saying for the longest time there's plenty to do in this game. You just got to make your own fun. But a lot of people just want to jump into an experience and experience it. And that's what this is. This is all about the narrative stuff. Now, question in chat, will the other characters work now also? That is part of what we started to see last year. Before we even knew that a mission giver was coming in 4.1, we already saw in monthly reports that they were working on mission givers. They were testing how they could update them and how they could get them working. And with server meshing in, I do think that it's going to be easier for them to be running. Will they be running in 4.1? I don't know. We'll jump in and see. but I think they'd make a bigger deal out of it if they got them all fixed. They might be reworking all their mission chains. What else is in 4.1 that has people excited? Well, the Volt weapon is not actually a huge deal, but it is, again, a sign of changing times. With the context, it makes a bigger deal. If you go back in the roadmap, just like with Mission Givers, all the way back here, you'll see that we were getting weapons pretty regularly. We got ship weapons, we got, here's the Karna. We got player weapons, FPS weapons, the F-55's over here. Got the S-38, good favorite. The Lumen 5 is a good one. The nobody uses this thing. Sniper rifles, more sniper rifles, SMGs, pistols, all kinds of stuff. Just weapons on weapons on weapons, all the way up until 312. And then there is nothing. So the idea that, this reinforces the idea that this team was removed from Star Citizen and just sent to Squadron 42, because that's where most of the weapon play had to be done. So we just weren't getting weapons from the year 2020 all the way up until, 4.1. And again, it's not a huge deal that we're getting weapons, but it is a big deal that the team clearly has enough leeway, enough freedom to start developing stuff for the PU again. And they did say also that after they release this first parallax in 4.1, they will probably release the quartz or the SMG in 4.1.1 and continue on from there, because there are like 3 or 4 of them, I think. So we're starting to see some more movement in Star Citizen. It's not a lot, it's not a ton. I still think Squadron is defining how Star Citizen gets developed, but it is a sign that that kind of thing's happening. And we see that with narrative too, which we'll get to in a second. Yeah, so we got the parallax, the quartz. Those are the 2 they added, which is the SMG. But we also know there is a pistol and a sniper rifle, so I think there's 4 weapons in total. So they'll be trickling those out as well, and probably working on a couple more weapons too. We know that there's that AK, that pyro-looking AK. There's the Novia crossbow, which we still haven't seen. They're working on non-lethal weaponry like tasers. So FPS weaponry is back on the table. Okay, then we move on from there. And the next thing on the roadmap that's coming up is armor. This hasn't even been shown in the PTU. This might not even be a 4.1 thing. This might be 4.1.1. But as we could see, they're bringing in new armor sets. This is significant because just like with weapons, I don't even know when the last time we got armor was. There's not as much armor variety in the game as with weapons. I think the last time we might have seen something would have been here with the actor status system and like weather, and they gave us some bigger armors. There might be a couple special edition ones that we've gotten that are like subscriber gear that they've moved in, and variants and stuff like that. Have we gotten armor pretty recently outside of that? They don't really put it on the roadmap, huh? It's like a lot of the special stuff. Morozov, yeah, that's right. Morozov is new. The Tavarin inspired one is pretty new. There are a couple other combat focused ones, right? Artemex is pretty new, right? And then, yeah, so they've brought in like the dusters and the faction based armor, and then that bounty hunting armor. So they did better at armor in Star Citizen. That is true. Armor set, not a huge deal on its own, but it also does kind of speak towards something else that is planned to happen soon, which is customization here. So here's what they had to say about armors that are starting to come into the game.
We were always going to make sure that you look your best, but now with added purpose. So to recap, we're going to go through adding intent and purpose to all our clothing and armor sets. As designers, we really want the visuals to match the stats that our great character art team have made. So for example, if a pair of pants look particularly armored, chances are they'll have modest damage mitigation to match. Many armors will be specialized for distinct use cases. Currently, we realize right now bigger is generally better when it comes to FPS armor, and we know that shouldn't always necessarily be the case. There will be some armors that won't have EVA thrusters built into the suit, so you lose EVA capability. Some armors won't even be space-worthy. Specializations means getting better at certain things at the cost of attributes and others. This is about compelling you, the player, to make tactical decisions for every situation you may find yourself in. So now let's look at some practical use cases for the Starware system. Whilst all our armors are becoming specialized, let's take a look at a select few, which I will add are some of my favorites.
So
We are
the important thing to note here is that even if we go to, I'll just pick a random just to show you kind of how much this was a thing last year. Star Citizen, give me a month. First month that pops up in chat, I'll search it. May monthly report. There is a good chance, God, I shouldn't do this to myself. There is a good chance. Yeah, we did it. Okay, that's always scary that I'm going to be wrong. In the art section last May, they completed the high poly phase for 2 specialist armors and continued updating utility armor. A new heavy specialist armor began development too. So there's just grabbing out of the freaking bag. You can find any month really last year. They were talking about armors being worked on. And then we saw this whole thing with Starware at CitizenCon. Clearly, they are diving back into armor in a new way with sort of more conviction. And this is not a new thing. Once again, it might seem like they're whipping it out of nowhere. They're suddenly complicating armor. They're not. Here is 2019. Richard Tyrer talking about where they wanted to go with armor even back then.
All power. So you can have different power if you're buying a new ship. And we want armor to be almost like your own personal ship when you're walking around the verse. We want absolute meaningful differences between that light, medium, and heavy armor class. And so where does that start? First off, it starts off by giving it all power. So you can have different power ratings. Then we have different signatures in terms of EM, in terms of IR that tie into FPS stealth. Then you've got inventory. Now inventory is, like you said, it's, you've got a physicalized backpack, but it goes more than that. That backpack's going to be modular. You'll be able to attach different sizes of backpack, and they will only go onto different pieces of armor. So you'll have to make meaningful choices. And then you've got life support, which is, how much oxygen can I carry? What's the climate control in this system? What temperature can it survive? And temperature is something I'll be going on again further on. But again, then you look at, say, for example, the next layer is subcomponents. Now, as I took through the weapons, you look at attachments. It allows you to further specialize or further diversify. That's what subcomponents are going to be. If you want to, put heavy armor on, but you want to add more armor plating, or you want, emission dampeners, or you want further utility and gadgets that we release in the future, that's where subcomponents come in. But really, that's just the armor classes themselves. That's the light, medium, and heavy armor classes. And that's kind of like just the base foundation, kind of how I was saying in the weapons, you've got your base classes. Now, where's the exotic gameplay? So that's when we're looking at, say, the classes and play styles. So we want to support the player careers. So in the PU, you want to be a miner, you want to be a bounty hunter, you want to be a fighter, you want to be an explorer. We want to support those on the ship side, but we also want to support them
just to let you see, it gets a little bit more complicated. So he has the whole matrix here. But then they even go into how like temperature mitigation, body protection will depend on which limbs are actually protected. So are you wearing armored legs, or are you just wearing an armored core? That kind of stuff will even have an effect on like how well you can mitigate temperature and stuff. They've had these plans for this, and this is actually where they announced this stuff. So this was the first time they really gave us any sort of stats on armor in game. But this stats system was super, super basic compared to now what they're talking about doing with Starware, which it does look like is part of what's going on here. Oh, not there. Here.
We pick 6 generalized stats to give you like a high-level understanding of how various clothing and armors we specialized. This is by no means a comprehensive list of everything we have available to us. It's just a little, yeah. So here you can see the lead.
Yeah, the pouches are going to be really cool. I can't wait for that. So you guys think that this is the suit that they just put in the game, and that this is gonna? I mean, yeah. That makes sense. Now, everything that we see in the game is probably being created for this system, even if this system isn't in the game. So we'll notice a lot more unique features of the armor. Because like he said, if you have more protection or more mobility or something like that, physically that'll be represented by the art of the suit that you're wearing. So then this, not that, this, no, not that, this, here we go. This armor set Could also be a pretty significant deal to be added to the game. Again, not for what it means for that exact moment, but what it shows their perspective and their focus is on and direction they're heading is in. Moving on, we'll come back to space combat missions. The other big thing that we've seen in this is the Hathor locations. And these are a big deal because, well, they're locations that have been added that don't just tell you to do one thing and then leave. These are new ground locations, unlike any really we've had before. The closest parallel to these we have in game right now are contested zones, but these are not meant to play like contested zones. These are open area, open sky, completely accessible locations inside of crime stats that aren't meant to encourage you to loot, but have plenty of loot for you to find, aren't meant to encourage you to shoot people, but will require you to shoot people if you're there to do certain things. These are locations that just fit into a larger sandbox narrative that you can interact with or not at any point during the process. And this is almost legitimate dynamic events. Because the whole point of a dynamic event is something that players can trigger that occurs in game that changes the game environment. In order to make this happen, you have to get a group of players together to trigger a couple different lockers, to move a couple key cards around, to activate a couple systems, both here on the ground and all the way up in space in orbit around the moon, to then fire off a laser that penetrates the ground and causes other things to happen. I'm going to get to this week in Star Citizen. It causes new enemies to spawn. It might cause new minables to show up. We don't know entirely everything that it does, but this is just one little puzzle piece to the overall Star Citizen that can persist in this game forever, that allows for us to get something that can be interacted with in the game and make a huge difference that isn't just like laid out to you and told to do. I would love the idea of tripping into any cool game that I enjoy. I've been playing a little bit of Avowed. If I stepped into Avowed and just kind of puttered around the game world and came across some button, and if I pressed that button and then another button on the other side of the river, I could create a dam in the river that creates this lake, and then the place that gets dried up from the dam suddenly has a bunch of loot I can get. That's really freaking cool. And to me, that's what this is kind of doing on a larger scale. So I'm excited to see how this plays out, because I think this is the first big version of this. And I hope that it works out how they want it to. Yeah, I didn't really consider comm array hacks dynamic events. I mean, they kind of are. They're just not really eventimous. But I definitely think the security post Korea change they made and the Ghost Hollow mission were both small dynamic events. Yeah. And they're slowly growing bigger and bigger. We started small, and all the events that were shown as dynamic, like Jumptown, weren't actually, but these are. And this is something that will attract players' attention. It will create for new opportunities. It will make situations that you literally cannot write, because it will all depend on what's going on at that exact moment. This is so good for the game, in my opinion. Better than contested zones, better than missions, in some ways better than even mission givers. But it's nice that in 4.1 we're getting both something like this that really benefits group gameplay and also can be good for solo gameplay. And we're also getting something like this, which really benefits solo gameplay, but also has some pretty good benefits for group gameplay. It's just like, this is, I think, a really well-balanced patch. Correct you if you're wrong, but didn't Hathor also kind of come out of nowhere? They didn't really hint at it before. To the PU, we've known about the group. They've existed in the lore for quite a while, and they were in the theaters of war. But as far as being put into the PU, we had no idea this was coming. No. And I don't think this is the last time we'll see it this year. I think this is the type of standard they want to set for these major updates. Now, the last thing that I haven't touched on that I said we get back to is the space combat missions. And these are, it says, improved scenario design and refined storytelling for ship combat. I don't think these are in the game, are they? Has anybody tested these in the PTU? I am not aware. But I'll say this, combat missions are so much better when it's escort this player or protect this ship than when it's just go to this place and kill 2 ships. Any kind of objective and narrative added to it is better than these boring bounties we've been running all this time. Oh my gosh. And I don't know if these are going to be actually, like, I don't think these will replace bounties. These will probably go into the mercenary section. But better space combat is nice, right? That's pretty solid. We've seen a couple of missions that they've worked on for this in the past. I don't know if I'd be able to find one off the top of my head. Let's say... I mean, I guess let's try the May monthly report again. What harm could it do? They were working on some space combat focused gameplay missions a little while ago. I don't know how far back I'd have to go to find it, but they've had some missions in the back burner that used combat, and it very well could be that we're doing that. These are missions that required you to follow a ship around that was like stopping off at different locations and quantum jumping around the system. They might do that. They might have us follow an AI through quantum travel and help them get through Pyro or something. I don't know. But the idea that we are also going to be seeing combat in this patch is not as important to me because combat is everywhere. But it is, again, just nice balance to an overall patch. Now, this isn't just about these things. This is also about... Oh, I'd also like to say that with these sandbox locations, because this whole emphasis on how long it took for us to get mission givers and weapons, just to be clear, sandbox locations also are pretty hit or miss for Star Citizen. Obviously, we get locations like the space stations, we get the colonialism outposts, and we got some like derelicts, I think, all the way back here. Maybe here? Yeah, derelicts and derelict outposts all the way back in 317, but look at how sparse they were even then. Going all the way back to 315, this is the first stuff that Turbulent ever worked on. So this is when they acquired the Montreal studio. They got their hospitals done, sure, but hospitals don't do much for us, right? Gameplay-wise. Move forward some more. And you got derelict spaceships. Okay, we've seen a couple of those, but I don't know how many of you got more than like maybe a few visits out of this before it got really repetitive. The loot wasn't great. The AI weren't great. The locations themselves were kind of iffy. And the puzzles were pretty easy. Moving forward after that, we saw some additional Lagrange locations, colonialism outposts, which gave us some better missions, but the freaking dropships that showed up here to give us AI didn't work. A lot of times you'd show up here and there'd just be nothing to do, no loot to get, anything like that. So those locations didn't do much. The Derelict Reclaimer settlement was good because we got Ghost Hollow. This was probably the last sandbox location that gave us good things to do. But even then, still, AI was lacking and loot was just not there. So you keep going forward and you got hospitals, Daymar crash site, which was okay. And then you started getting these caves. These caves would come in and not really give us any gameplay with them. Got the sand caves, got the acidic caves, got the rock caves, got Lorville remade, not much there. Seraphim Station just replaced Port Olisar. Crusader platforms, they lost the missions that don't work there. So you can see this trend of locations coming into the game and offering some good stuff here and there, which was appreciated at the time. And they definitely look good. But as far as gameplay goes, this is arguably one of the most fully featured locations we've ever seen in the game. And even taking into account Ghost Hollow, that was still back in 2022. So this also is kind of a big deal because it has interaction with the environment. It has loot that is challenging to get and causes you to go there. AI that works. Plenty of space to experiment, and there's some form of objective for you to work through. And I think this is going to be a very exciting and long-term addition for folks. But then we go on to the item recovery, which we just talked about at length. We won't get back into this, but this is also a big change. And for a whole bunch of different reasons, for a whole bunch of different people, this is going to have a pretty profound effect on how this game is played. and thus making 4.1 come off a little bit bigger. There's also, I believe, a lot of ship rebalancing has been going on, so it shows a lot more work going into the quality of life of the game and of the ship experience. The momentum and mass calculations for ships are being changed so that they make more sense when ships encounter one another. Your Aurora is not going to blow up with a Polaris when it hits it, kind of thing. What else is there? There's a lot of little things. I'm sure we'll start getting some more patch watches over the next week or two that tell us more about the different things that are changing here. But as far as what people I think were expecting with this new form of patches every month, 4.1 has come off as a pretty big surprise for many folks. And even if it was a regular patch during a regular year, you can see that there's plenty of stuff in here that we would not normally get. Even before 3.18, when we were getting the pretty content-heavy patches, the sandbox locations we were getting didn't function quite how we wanted. There was nothing in terms of narrative being added. The dynamic events we were getting weren't actually dynamic. And the gameplay itself, I don't think was as engaging. They were focused more on features. Now they're focused more on content. But I think we're starting to see the effects of that, and it's got people pretty excited for 4.1. Big thing that matters is how many glitches can they fix and how much stability can they pump into this. So we'll see how that goes. But at least for now, as far as the additions in 4.1, I hope that helps understand why people are actually excited for the patch.